Joining me now on the commute, the first time that we've really done the commute with video, is Savannah Mayor Van Johnson. And as we air this piece, it is going to be 2 days before the first Savannah City Council meeting of the year on Thursday, January the 14th. And that means that we have a year behind us for Mayor Johnson and the current council. And I wanted to take this opportunity with Mayor Johnson to talk back, look back on his first year, look back on the council's first year, look ahead to the new year. But I want to start this. I want to talk a little bit about you and your first year, Mayor. If somebody asked me the other day about it, and I said that the thing that really struck me about Mayor Johnson in the first year is he rose to the occasion, whether it was the handling of the COVID-19, the race rally that we had back around Memorial Day, and just in general, the leadership that you showed. And I know that it wasn't something that you planned on, and I think maybe that's the truest test of it, was that it was kind of thrust upon you and you had to react. But did you feel coming in that you were ready to show this kind of leadership? And what, if you had to pinpoint a couple of things, what did you lean on throughout the process to facilitate that?
Well, thank you, first of all, for the opportunity. I would call it orchestrated madness in 2020. I never would have expected, when I gave the inauguration speech on January 2nd, 2020, that 2 months later we would be in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. And so for me, I leaned on a couple of things. I leaned on my faith. I leaned on my knowledge and education of government as a student of public administration, and then as a 25 plus year employee of local government. And then I leaned on the attributes of my predecessors. Certainly the very thoughtful, cerebral process and thoughts of Mayor Otis Johnson, the empathetic, heavy touch attributes of Mayor Edna Jackson, and the business acumen of Mayor Eddie Deloach. And I think those really served me well. And then also looking at best practices, I think gave me an opportunity to be prepared. I mean, although people say, well, you're really new at this. I mean, the fact was I've been involved with local government here. This was 16 years before I became mayor. And so, we've dealt with issues from G8. We've dealt with issues such as explosions and hurricanes and a variety of things. And so between that and then bringing all those other attributes of my predecessors and my knowledge to bear, and the faith, and felt that I was divinely inspired to make some of these right decisions. For me, that was, I think that was very helpful.
At the same time, there's one thing to be in the band, to be somebody who helps and hears and talks through these decisions, and then the front man who has to actually
absolutely
decisions.
Absolutely.
What did you learn maybe about yourself last year, just being put in these pressure situations?
I learned that that I was probably, when I was very concerned about making a decision, and to be very thoughtful about it. And I would ask people in my inner circles, and there were several of them, that once it was cemented in my mind that this was the best way to go, that I would go with my gut. And so there were several opportunities in which this was absolutely true. I mean, there was every reason in the world not to cancel the St. Patrick's Day Parade. At the time, we had heard from the state that it would be safe to have a parade. And I remember being in Washington, D.C., and I remember it was a couple of nights I could not sleep. And one night I finally fell asleep, and I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was like, no, we have to cancel this. And I changed my flight. I came back that day, and now we recognize that was probably the best thing.
Yeah, all you gotta do is look at Mardi Gras
right.
to have any kind of evidence for that.
We watch across the country what was happening, and watching Atlanta burn, and watching Charleston. And again, these folks are coming our way. We know they're coming our way. And it was the same type of thing. Let's go ahead, let's get in front of this, and let's really rely on the power of Savannahans to help protect their city. And so we got in front of it, and again, we had 14, 15 arrests, hardly no property damage. And then the mask mandate was the same thing. It was the right thing to do. Although we recognize that there might be some pushback from the state, it was clear that it was the right thing to do, and we pushed forth on it. And still, nationally, we're being told that we did the right thing. And our numbers, although high, were relatively low with the rest of the state. And you could draw that the decreases or the lower trajectory based on the time that we implement the mask mandate. So, for us, this has just been opportunity after opportunity in which you just kind of draw on everything, and you listen to people, and you find ways to help people help themselves. And I think the government kind of helps to empower people to do that.
Because of those circumstances, it is somewhat hard to look back at the first year and say, okay, we deserve a grade of this, just because there were so many other extenuating circumstances. But this time a year ago, you have an inauguration, you talk about wanting to make sure everybody has a seat at the table. A couple of weeks later, you have a visioning retreat where it appears that most of the council members are in agreement on some key pillars. What happened from there maybe didn't fit that. It never does. There's always some things that go sideways. But when you look back at the council and the progress you've made in terms of policy in your first year, what are some of the things you feel like you accomplished? What are some of the things that you're a little disappointed about?
Well, I mean, to be absolutely clear, I think that we have a good council. I think we have a caring council. And, on policy, I think we have a council that is totally aligned on policy. It's the issue of personalities. And, sometimes there's just not much you can do about that. But this council, in the midst of a pandemic, was able to guide our city through a time in which we were able to roll back taxes for the second year in a row. We were able to maintain a budget and approve a budget that we were able not to furlough any employee, lay off any employee, not raise fees for any services. We were able to take 80% of our CARES Act money, which was supposed to be round one, and put $3.3 million to help people in evictions and foreclosures, and help their utilities, and $2 million to help local businesses. We were able to institute a Savannah First package, which increased our local percentage for local businesses buying, where we would spend most of our money locally, and that we were able to help businesses by having parklets. And again, so it was just so many things that we really did well. We've managed this in a time that none of us had ever managed it before,
right? Or expected to.
Right. Yeah. And being engaged on a national level with the National League of Cities, National Conference, U.S. Conference of Mayors. There are cities that are just doing so much worse, and we've been able to at least be relatively okay in this. We recognize there was a lot of hurt, a lot of pain. We could have done better, but I think it's just very, very hard to, particularly when 2 of your 4 major forms of income were obliterated, during this year. Now, what we could have done better, obviously, my thought is, city manager search. I think that we had a decent search. I think that the methodology for it was good and sound. But the end of the day is that you have to have a candidate that 9 or most of 9 people can agree on. And so it's not enough to have 5-4, although people say just pick 5-4 and go on. Well, I mean, what people may not recognize that each candidate, I asked them, would you come here on a 5-4 vote? And all 3 said no. And that's important because, would you want to come? And half of your bosses don't really want you there. Now, there are some people out there in the country who will come on a 5-4 vote. My plan is to, in 2 days, at our city council meeting, for us to agree on a methodology and a plan to restart the search. I think it's the most, and I think you've said it before, it's the most important decision we make, to hire our quarterback. And so I will go through a thoughtful, deliberative process again. I think we received rave reviews for the way that we, in the midst of a pandemic, were able to create community sector interviews where people had opportunity to weigh in. That's something I committed to. There will be a public process, even though it was a council decision. And hopefully from this time, we'll be able to come up with a candidate that the majority of council can live with.
We talk about policy, kind of the foundational point of policy for you in this council is being done a little bit in the background in terms of task forces and exploring everything and getting a lot of community voices in. And we've already seen the fruits of that to a certain extent with some of the use of force things that came out of the task force that was looking at policing. You have a lot of other task forces doing their work. Affordable housing, I think, is one that we're all really anxious to see what comes out of there. What is the plan, or what is the timeline in terms of getting some of these policies and these ideas that are going to come out of these task forces and implementing them into council discussion and council implementation?
Right. Well, and that's a good question. For me, it was always important that we would have staff come up with policy, and then we would float policy to the community and to council. My way of doing business is that it was easier to have interested parties working on policy on the front end.
With the staff, yeah.
Right. Hence the task force. And so, I've been able to appoint task force. So we have well over 250 maybe citizens working on issues that are important to them. Some of them are relational. Some of them are directly policy driven. And so, you mentioned already the Savannah Cares Task Force, which is Citizens Accountability and Review of Emergency Services. This task force has already reaped benefits. They've already, in their preliminary report, came up with 12 recommendations for the police department, of which the police department have implemented 10 of them. So already, this is major work toward better use of force, and really of how our community perceives policing. They will now embark on actual interviews in the community with people who have had actual experiences, good and bad, with our police department, and they'll come up with some more recommendations. Once that final report is completed, that committee may go away. We might keep them around to do something else as it relates to reviewing police and fire services. The Housing Task Force, which is another one that I talked about, I promised during my campaign that we would have a affordable housing plan, which currently we do not have. This is a big task force with a lot of people that are working hard. As a matter of fact, they are supposed to have to us, I believe, in the first quarter, late first quarter, early second quarter of this year, a draft for council to review. It will involve things that we know should be done: inclusionary zoning, density, and different tools to be able to really deal with blighted communities in our community, to get them rehabbed, to get them redeveloped, and get them back on the tax rolls. We know Savannah has to be affordable for Savannahans. And so, that's been our challenge. And so, they've been working hard on that. The other task force, I'm proud of it. I'm proud of all of them, but this is it's Real Savannah, Racial Equity and Leadership. And this is dealing with us finally having a conversation about the elephant in the room, and that's issues of race and disparity. We talk about it in small groups, we whisper about it, but I promise that we were going to actually have this conversation. And so, led by Dr. Otis Johnson, we are finally talking about disparity. But the difference is that we are going to actually quantify it. So if it exists, we'll see it in data. and come up with recommendations. If it's not there, then we are going to say for once and for all, it's not there. So that report is supposed to be done hopefully in August of this year. So I'm looking forward to that. Our Proud Savannah Task Force is our partnership with the LGBT community. In 6 months, we have raised our municipal equity index score from 30 to 79, which deals with issues of inclusiveness and equity. So we're really proud of that. OLA Savannah, which is Hispanic Outreach, Leadership, and Advocacy. Another great task force about building relationships with our Hispanic community. So again, we have all of these task forces. Working Savannah, which is a great partnership with our labor community. This year we'll be Savannah Faith is another one. Almost 200 faith leaders in our community. They were able to come up with guidelines for houses of faith remaining open or closed during this pandemic. They came up with those recommendations. Most of our faith houses in Savannah remain closed. And that's part of the reason why our numbers have been down. So we have a bunch of them. We're excited about that. This year we'll be debuting some more. Savannah Ability is one that's coming forth that I'm really proud of because it's really talking about making Savannah available for those of different abilities, not only physical, but also those that have mental and developmental abilities, and those that are seniors. How do we make Savannah accessible and available for them? Also, literacy we're going to take on, which is I call Read Savannah. We recognize that people always talk about jobs. We need more jobs, higher paying jobs. But the problem is you have to have the skill level to get to those jobs. So we know that if people are able to read, if they're able to have high school diplomas, if they're able to skill up, then they're able to be prepared for the workforce that we're trying to attract here. So, and then, finally coming up soon will be Emerging Savannah. And that is for our, what we call Generation Next. These are our up and comings. And again, we want them to be, we want to hear from them. We want to be engaged with them. We want to know what's going on with them as they help us to make our city into what it should be. So, I don't think anything is wrong when you create seats at the table. And I've tried very hard to do that. Receive criticism for doing that. But I think more importantly, it helps us to supercharge our work and it provides council with recommendations that we can implement relatively quickly.
There's one thing that keeps you up at night. I know there's probably several things, but if there is one thing, I think it's probably some of the relationship issues that you've had within the council. I know that, if you could wave your magic wand and figure out exactly what would make everything kosher again, you do it. But as you look ahead we have 3 more years of this group together. What can be done, what should be done, what might be done to kind of get everybody on the same page and away from some of the more personal and destructive behavior that's going on?
Well, again, I think the benefit is that, I'm a human resources professional, a former law enforcement professional. I'm used to dealing with folk. And I've been on council for 16 years. I've dealt with difficult people, difficult councils. Obviously, my last term with Mayor Deloach wasn't always good for me. But I think we were always able, even though we disagreed, we were always able to remain collegial. I mean, I would be able to disagree on something, and then later on we're talking about the family and what's going on. My position is this. I'm not anybody's parent. I'm the mayor of the city. I can only control me. I can only control how I treat people. And I've committed, and my personal and professional conviction is that I'm always going to treat every member of council as a colleague with the greatest level of respect. I'm going to respect them even if they don't respect me. I'm not going to call people out of their names. I'm not going to make accusations about people. For those of you who know on my social media, I don't talk about my council members. I don't engage in that type of behavior. And so, at the end of the day, it's up to the public to hold people accountable for what they do. And so if you're familiar, Adam, of any time that I've acted inappropriately, please let me know. But it was very important to me always that, as a Christian and as a gentleman, that I'm always going to